Now, this is one of the best books I read in American history. It was written by Martin Luther King. Uh, one of the greatest books I read in my life uh, as far as American history. Um, Trump, during CPAC, after the incident of January 6th, after uh, the atrocities that happened in the Capitol building, Trump said in CPAC, while he was looking for the nomination of the Republican Party for 2024, he said about Martin Luther King and the I Have a Dream speech that he gave in Washington. Trump said, "My crowds were bigger than his. If you look closely, my crowds were they were packed in tight, but they were bigger than his." And then he said, "And even my speech was better than his." That's what he said at the CPAC conference while he was seeking a nomination for 2024. Martin Luther King was never for violence. He was always pro peace, civil rights, pro peace. He stood on the side of civil rights and he followed his mentor, Gandhi. Gandhi fought apartheidist bigotry in India and liberated India from apartheidist bigotry, pro peace. And that's what Martin Luther King believed in, to judge people not for their color of the skin, not for their religion, to judge them on the character of their credo, meaning for what they stand for. He was pro peace. He believed in an America that was all for 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 liberty and freedoms for all, and regardless of ethnicity, and regardless of of origins, of ethnicities. Not like Trump believes these are people from shithole places. If they don't like it here, let them go back from which they came. Referring to congresswomen because they're Africans. They're African. One of them is African congresswoman that happens to be Muslim. The other one happened to be a congresswoman that happened to be Palestinian. The other one was Puerto Rican. And see the strike uh, difference this, between Trump and how he dares to compare himself to Martin Luther King. At the end of the day, he said that the the speech that he gave in the ellipse, Trump said that the speech that I gave in the ellipse, somehow in CPAC he said that his speech was better than Martin Luther King. You know, Martin Luther King took stones. They stoned him. And he dropped down to his knees. And then he got back up and kept on marching without raising not even a curse word of violence to whoever threw the stone. He got his arms bended behind him and tossed in jail like a criminal just for marching to liberate freedoms for civil rights. And at the end of the day, Trump is going to desecrate his legacy by saying his movement in January 6th was better than Martin Luther King's. When Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. Shouting from the mountaintop that the day will come when all people are judged by their character, but not by bigotry, not by racism, not by prejudice, and definitely not by violence. He stood non-violently, and he marched non-violently. When whites in this country were saying, you can't sit at that lunch counter because you're black. You can't drink from that water fountain because you're black. You can't go to the same schools because you're black. During the 1960s, when they were denying them the freedom to vote because they were black. And how dare Trump desecrate his I Have a Dream speech with January 6th? How dare he compare himself and say that somehow his speech was better than Martin Luther King's? That somehow hanging Mike Pence, killing Capitol Police officers, blowing up the first African American vice president and the first African American lady vice president with 2 pipe bombs, kidnapping a governor from Michigan and executing her in a firing squad, that somehow his movement is better than Martin Luther King's. How dare he desecrate the great Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King stood for something, and it was not bigotry, it was not racism, and it was not violence. There's a sharp contrast between Martin Luther King and what Trump movement is. And it's definitely not merited to compare himself to the movement of civil rights. And to desecrate the movement of civil rights. He said, oh, these are unpatriotic son of a bitches. They're disrespecting the flag. They don't love our country. Trump was saying that a year at every rally, they're disrespecting the flag. Civil rights people for kneeling and praying to God for awareness to righteousness, to be considered equal, without xenophobia, without bigotry, without divisiveness. And you have a president saying they're unpatriotic. They're disrespecting the flag. While Trump is busy defending the Confederacy of General Lee after Nazis march around it. Trump kept on going through every rally of his bragging about General Lee. Trump Jr. bragging about how the Kentucky Confederate flag was part of a proud tradition. There's nothing wrong with proud traditions. Well, I beg to differ. That was not part of a proud tradition. But as chief of commander, they're having an affair with the Confederate flag, with the Confederate symbolisms. There's something seriously wrong in the Republican Party. It's definitely not the party of Lincoln.